Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Insight Sports Talk with myself, Johanna-Rosalye, and my co-host will not be with us tonight. Hopefully, PLR, that you feel better. Look forward to next week. So we have a lot that has transpired over the course of the week and the last 2 weeks for us. So we see that sports is trying to make a return. Missed COVID-19, with sports has been on hold. The world has been without sports. I know we miss them. I certainly do miss sports. Over the weekend, we did have the first UFC fights come back. And they came back and they were a hit and success. UFC was able to do the testing, and they did have one of their fighters test positive. Amidst that, they still were able to go ahead and move on with the card, move on with the fights, the event, and it went off in tremendous success. With that one fighter that did test positive, they did remove those fighters that from the card, that match from the card, and they just were able to pull it off. And I guess to say this is one of the very few sports, or maybe even the only sport, that can make this possible. They did sign waivers, of course, for UFC not being liable, responsible, and so forth. So what does this mean for other sports? Baseball, we are seeing that the owners have okayed a proposal, a plan to make a comeback this summer. We know as far as that it would be a 82 game season. So it would be a shortened season, not the a regular season that you would see given. Seeing that it would begin July 1, July 4th is what I'm hearing, and it's being rumored to be an opening day. There is universal designated hitters for not only the American League, which is where you see the designated hitter, but also being expanded over to the National League. Having a 14 team playoff, playing in home stadiums, allowing for that, given that they do go ahead and have the okay to have games in those states for those teams where the games are going to be held. Having spring training start mid-June, we will call it spring training 2.0, the second part of the spring training, and having also allowing the teams with expanded rosters. What does this mean for baseball? What does this mean for the players, for the teams, for everybody involved? What are going to be the safety measures? What are the protocols that they're going to follow? There's a lot to keep in mind and a lot to think about here. The players, are they okay with this? We have USC that, yes, the fighters did say they wanted to fight. They were willing to take that risk. But how much of a risk is too much of that risk, With UFC, you're able to do that more of a social distancing because there's not so many people involved. Yes, there's a lot that goes into it, but you're able to implement that social distancing and able to provide more safety measures there and be able to follow those protocols. With baseball, it's a little bit more complicated than that. You have your average roster, put it at let's say 20 to 30 players in the clubhouse and the dugout. We've covered it on the show before. We have the bullpen, you have the trainers, you have the coaches, the umpires, you name it. It's so much and so many people that are involved in the game. Is it worth the risk? Yes, you're gonna have the expanded rosters, but who's going to be allowed to partake in that game? Being that a player gets injured, whatever the scenario, whatever the case may be. And another thing is the families are going to be affected as well. The quarantine, they're going to be staying in hotels. Just so much. And just the bigger, even larger question here is players willing to take that risk. And then another thing with that risk comes what's going to happen when a player does test positive. So is it going, it's not like with UFC, okay, you're able to remove the match from the card. Here it affects not only a player, but it affects a team. So with that player being tested positive, what does it mean for that team? Yes, you can go ahead and remove the player, but what about the others? What about the team? What about the coaches that may have been in contact with that individual? Does that mean that, okay, now you're not going to have that team play, which then removes, it's going to remove those games and having those scratched and not being played? How is that? There's a bigger picture here. What's going to happen when a player does get tested? How is MLB going to handle that? That's where my question lies. Yes, the safety protocols of what is going to be allowed and not allowed is another thing. With KBO, we're seeing, hey, no spitting, no high fives or contact. They're wearing masks, keeping at a distance, which is something that you can do with baseball when you're playing out in the field. Maybe you can do it somewhat in the dugout, or only having those players partaking in the game, social distance and being out in the dugout, or maybe the stands. There will be no fans attending. It'll be, we saw that with the UFC. And it did take a different take on it. There was a different take on it. Quiet. You don't have the emotion, that vibration, that vibe that you get from being at the game or at a fight or at the event. So, but one thing with UFC, you're able to kind of see a little bit, not see, I would say, hear more of that contact that each fighter is making, those connections, and it's more, you can say, you can have that rawness in that. One of the things that you will also be able to see here is going to be with baseball too, having more of that audio, audible there. So we'll see how this ends up planning out, and if the players do agree. So the MLBs, of course, they're covering to make sure that everybody's safety, is taken care for. And MLB wouldn't be one to rush into something if they see that it wasn't ready or if it wouldn't be safe, because they're one of the leagues that covers for every little aspect and make sure that how would I say that, they make sure that nobody's in jeopardy, that their players are safe, their employees are safe. So we saw NBA was the first one to go ahead and pull the plug and made, from dismissing games and stop playing games. Everybody else there followed when the pandemic hit. So will the same thing happen whereas sports make a comeback, MLB being the first league out there to go ahead and implement these games? Of course, we did see UFC. It's a little bit different there, different aspect. But as far as leagues go, MLB being the first possible league to go ahead and make that leap, and then seeing how that plays out, and other leagues to follow, like the NBA, NHL, MLS. So that's the picture there that I would like to see how it all gets illustrated. With the NBA, they're also now in talks of the possible comeback for a season, possible season, wrapping up the season. And with with NBA, it's a little bit more difficult to have that social distancing. There's so much contact within the player. It's nothing but contact. It's not a contact sport per se, but you're making that contact with each play in the court, blocking and jumping up on each other, blocking the plays, or just such close proximity. The same thing, and then even more of a dynamic here, more prone to having players being contracted with the virus, with COVID. What's going to happen when the same thing with positive testing? Is it going to be more of a hit on the players, on the teams, on the games, and on the league? How is NBA going to handle that too? It's not, you see, okay, it's a possibility, and they're taking all these measures, but there's so much more to the picture here. And then just overall, is just the players' safety. Are they safe? Would you, as a player, be willing to take that risk? We know that of the virus, many that are asymptomatic, they don't show symptoms. They'll know that they have it, and they end up testing positive. There's those that you do see, and they have the side effects. They have it all, and they can get severely ill. Those are the things of the unknown, and don't know how it's going to affect you. You may be affected and not even know it. So NBA, if we can hear within the next 2 to 4 weeks of them making a decision of if the season does make a comeback. But that's one of the leagues that I would least see coming back for this season. I see it more of a possibility, making a return, not making a return to wrap up the season and just make it a wrap. We've said it before on the show. I don't see that they should be making or taking the risk and exposing the players, especially when there's so many questions up in the air, especially with the NBA and how close they are with each other, and all the involvement in it. So within the next couple of weeks, we should hear, or even just the coming days, how all this evolves, and what are the players' reservations. We'll start hearing from players. With MLB, we're already hearing some reservations of with MLB and the plan that they've had put in place, or the proposal that they presented and owners okayed for the sport to return. So we're seeing that in Europe, they're gradually starting to go ahead and have sports return. First, starting with trainings, definitely. One of the things here is, of course, players are going to need some time to get back into that player, not only mentality too, but in physical shape, in that in that game mode. So it's going to be some getting back to in the training. We know definitely that KBO, Korean baseball, made a comeback. So, but that's months from a shutdown that they had, and they're just barely making a return. We're 2 months in,